So what we wanted to do this afternoon is sort of build on what we spoke about this morning, the idea of putting together a framework for designing children's environments indoors and outdoors, and talk about how that gets implemented in a whole round of case studies. I think the other thing we wanted to emphasize as we go through these is that obviously all of us are going to be encountering different types of projects with different resources and different goals. And so I think when we talk about putting together a design framework, it's also important to keep in mind the idea that when we set ourselves a design goal or a concept or something that we want to achieve that supports a part of an educational program, that there's always different pathways to getting there. So I think what we're hoping to show you in these case studies is a pretty wide range of approaches, and not everything you see is going to be in an idealized setting. Some of it's working with existing conditions that are difficult and challenging to work around. Some of it's working with very small budgets. Others, we had a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom. But I think the idea of trying to set a set of project design goals and then figuring out with the resources that you have at hand and with the site, how do you make the most of the opportunities and challenges that you have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian, who's going to start out and walk us through a whole set of case studies.
All right, thanks, Mike. So like Mike said, we're going to be taking a look at a few case study projects that we've worked on. These are both interior, exterior, and combination. I can't seem to change. There we go. And just a combination of both the interior and exterior. So the first two examples that we're going to look at were essentially just feasibility studies that we worked on with LISC that unfortunately never actually came to fruition. This building was a former parochial school in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. It was built in the 60s and was at one point used as an elementary school for kindergarten through second grade. The building continued to operate until 2009, but then it closed its doors due to declining enrollment. It's an ideal site for a childcare center to be retrofitted into. The building has a footprint of over 15,000 square feet, and it sits on over 1.5 acres of land. However, the natural slope of the site does present some issues to work around. Due to the slope, the building has multiple locations where there are changes in the finished floor elevation. And when we were working on the conceptual plan for this building, we had to decide where the main entrance would need to be. And that was really determined by which level worked out best to have all of the infants and toddlers, as well as administration and storage spaces. And here you can see the conceptual plan that we developed with LISC's input and comments. So on this plan, you can actually see, and I don't know if anyone can actually see my mouse, but you can see that the central portion of the building here, it connects to the newer wing on the left here, as you can see in the green, and to the other portion on the top right, which is actually elevated from that central portion. This is the space that we thought would be best to house the infants and toddlers. So these classrooms for the younger age groups, they have to be located at ground floor, and they need direct egress out from each space. So as the children get older, they're more capable of moving up and down different levels for the building to be able to access their classrooms.
So Brian, I'm just going to jump in, sorry, and say that one of the reasons we wanted to talk about these feasibility studies is that the early, the very, very early site selection process is really also critical to quality outcomes, because there are some buildings that are just less suitable for this use. And I think if we can involve design professionals at the outset, as we're talking about looking at possible sites, and involve the licensors as well, we can avoid a lot of issues. We can also just make the most of the opportunities that exist. What Brian's pointing out here about the younger children and the older children, took a little bit of work to figure out, but the space on the left-hand side where you see it in green, which is a two-level, almost a separate building, that just seemed like a natural for a school age space because it was by itself, it was on two levels, and it was a little more difficult to access in a kind of a all together way, but it made a lot of sense for a separate drop off and a separate entrance and things like that.
Right, yeah. So one of the major difficulties, especially with the younger age group and the natural slope of the site, was really just being able to provide direct egress out from the younger classrooms. And there are 6 of them. So we also wanted to give an accessible route for them to be able to access their playground. And you could see that box area here, which is where we decided would be the best location for something like that. And then the school age could potentially have their own separate space up here or near the parking lot. But the elevation difference is really a few feet on this other portion here. And so we really thought that first we knew that we would need a ramp to build in order to get these classrooms out. And naturally, this made sense to us that if a ramp of this magnitude, as you can see down here, would need to be constructed, that we should just take advantage of that and use it as the accessible means to be able to access the playground. So we thought that naturally, this made the most sense for the location of that. And you can see the site plan here as well. And here you can see just some photos of the different conditions inside of the building. So there's obviously some work that would need to be done to this building. Renovations would need to include replacing the roof, replacing the HVAC, and updating the electrical and fire systems. Plumbing would need to be added in all of the classrooms, and new finishes would probably need to be applied throughout. The newer addition, which was that green portion of the previous plan that you saw, which Mike had spoken about, is essentially where the school-age children are going to be housed. And we had at one point talked about a possible teen center, but it would just need to have repairs because there's water infiltration, as you can see in this image here. Although the benefit is that it does get a lot of natural light, especially with the skylight. So it does have a lot of potential, and we recognize that it just needs some work, obviously.
I think another important thing to think about is and hopefully this is something as a little bit more capital money flows into the sector, is just having a set of contractors who are familiar with this type of project as well. Bringing somebody in at an early stage like this, both just to get a handle on cost, which is always kind of a gating factor for project feasibility, but also just thoughts on building construction and infrastructure and means and methods is really useful. I know in some markets where we do a lot of work and have contractors that have experience with childcare and with renovation for childcare, it just really makes the whole project a lot easier to manage.
Mm-hmm. So the next case study we looked at, another feasibility study that we worked on with LISC, is the Child and Family Services. And they're a nonprofit organization, and their mission is to strengthen individuals, families, and the communities in which they live. So they've operated a successful high-quality early learning center in Middleton, Rhode Island for years. And while the Middleton Center provides essential services to that community, their services are a bit lacking for families that they serve in their Providence location, which is what's pictured in this image. But we recognize that their building is an ideal location in the heart of Providence. And so what they wanted was to just explore ways to take advantage of the space that they have. And because they know that it's not being optimally used at the moment, one option that they explored was including and adapting it for use as an early learning center. And here you can see the conceptual plan. So working with LISC and Child and Family, we developed a proposed plan that could potentially add 128 children ranging from infant to school age in this location. They had enough space to divide the building and still be able to add 8 classrooms plus the administration and storage spaces, while still being able to keep half of the footprint for their own regular use. So the building was actually divided right along here. This is all still for their regular use. This is just a great option for the use of the space in a location that's really in need for more high quality, affordable care. And while this building is in much better shape than what we currently saw, that's also because it's currently in operation. It still does have the same issue of accessibility that plagued the previous case study. The entire building is on the same level here, which is ideal, but it's all elevated from the street. And so openings for doors would need to be added to the exterior to allow egress directly from the classroom spaces. And unfortunately, multiple ramps would likely be required along the perimeter, which would be pretty difficult actually because the building's flush to the sidewalk on 3 sides, as you can see here on the site plan.
Another thing that this raises is just the idea, which we're very interested in, is probably the subject of a whole another presentation, is the synergies of putting childcare and other service, social service or community service pieces together in community centers. We're working on, we just finished one project that includes housing for single mothers with childcare, and another one in Portland, Maine, which will have low-income housing and childcare in the same building as well, in the same complex. And I think the idea of housing medical services with childcare, the idea of housing things like food service or nutrition training, all kinds of different two-generational interventions with families and children really make a lot of sense. And we have projects that touch on that, but I think there's still an awful lot of opportunity to explore in that domain as well.
Unfortunately, I thought I removed this slide, but since it's here, I'll just talk about it quickly. These are just some images of the existing conditions at the Child and Family Services. So you can see that there's a lot going on the ceiling, which made it difficult for them to fully enclose their spaces. So acoustics would be an issue that we'd have to consider when working on this. So for this next project, we worked with Ellis Early Learning, which is formerly known as Ellis Memorial, and they have the goal of helping children to develop the social, emotional, and academic skills that they need to be successful in school and life. They stand out for being a very socioeconomically, racially, and culturally diverse organization, and research shows that this helps to build more empathy in the children, which allows them to thrive together. So Ellis Early Learning came to us with this request to renovate the small existing playground in the new center that they were proposing or planning on opening. And the space was previously used by Horizons for Homeless Children and featured a playground adjacent to the parking lot, which is the space that you actually see here. They came to us in May and they wanted to have their center open by September. So that really only allowed us 4 months to design and construct the playground that would be or provide effective social and physical development for their children. And here you can just see the plan that we came up with them or with their input. So in order to save as much on cost for the equipment and demolition as we could, we initially wanted to keep as much of the existing structures and fencing that were in place. But after reviewing it, we really thought that this proved not to really be possible just because of the condition and the safety concerns of the equipment that was already there. The existing surfacing was poured rubber, but there was a lot of cracks in a lot of areas that just had to be patched up over the years. And so really the space would be used by infants and toddlers and needed different activities that could be used for both age groups. We wanted to keep as much open space for the children, so we didn't want to separate the two age groups and minimize any of the space. The infants can use the sensory panels and the log bench to help develop their gross motor skills and upper body strength, while the toddler group can just work on the upper body strength and socialization through playing with water, sand, and the climbing structure. And this climbing structure actually, it had a 2 to 5 year age range, which isn't appropriate for the toddlers or the infants, but we were able to review it with Compan, who's the manufacturer for the piece. And we personally deemed that it would be appropriate for the toddlers. And so we were able to get Compan to provide a letter to approve the equipment when the licensor came, just to be able to have it be open and usable for the children. And they didn't have to worry about not being able to use their play space, especially since their entrance to the center is actually here through the playground.
I would just say too, Brian, in addition to having a very aggressive schedule, and it also had a very low budget. So this was built for under $125,000 in Boston, in the city of Boston. And so it's an example of, trying to work with a very limited space and a limited budget and achieve as much as possible of the, of the goals of the provider.
Mm-hmm. This one, so here you can see some before and after images of what it was like before versus what it is now. And because the playground was located on a parking lot, we wanted to make it feel as natural as it could be. So we specified small Amelanchier trees, and those have a really nice fall color, as well as blooming these nice white flowers in the spring. And the species also tends to produce this fruit that actually attracts a lot of birds as well. We wanted to provide planter boxes to allow the staff and the children to be able to grow their own vegetation, providing the children with an education opportunity where some of their food can come from. As you know, the parking lot's not really an ideal setting for a playground, and we really wanted to screen off the asphalt and the cars from the children. So as you can kind of see in this bottom right image here, the exterior face of the fence has this, well, you can't really see the exterior, but it has this faux ivy screen all around it. And we didn't really want to have that facing the interior just because we were concerned that the children might start destroying it and picking at it. So what we did instead for the interior was that we found this fence screen with a vine printing. And it just gave us visual separation that really helps to eliminate the atmosphere around the playground when you're inside. And it lets the children just thrive in whatever activity that they're engaged in without being distracted from the outside.
And once again, it was just a very low cost solution to that particular problem.
Yes. The next case study that we're looking at here is the Bright Horizons Jim Greenman Early Education Innovation Center. It's quite a mouthful. So as you may not know, or probably know, is Bright Horizons is one of the larger childcare providers in the United States, but they don't only offer childcare, they also offer elder care and help with education for careers. So as their lease was ending for their previous headquarters, which was located in Watertown, Massachusetts, they wanted to move to a location with much more potential for growth and just a better space where they can have better technology and facilities. So they also wanted to provide a model childcare center that would be a representation of their standard for providing high quality spaces for children to thrive in. And that included this new 10,500 square foot center along with a 9,500 square foot playground next to it. And the image here is of the preschool yard. And here you can see the plan for that. So the center had ample space. It had space for 8 classrooms that were able to all be laid out along the perimeter. It also included space for a large gross motor space and project room that could be opened with a garage door. So here you can see the space, the project room and the gross motor with the garage door. And this allowed it to be combinable just if they ever wanted to have events or so that children could just run through both spaces. And while there was ample space to provide direct access out to the playground for each classroom, it was still difficult as the building did have some pre-existing conditions that limited what we could do. So this building had been reinforced to withstand seismic activity in the past, and there was additional framing along the perimeter on the interior and the exterior of the building that had to be considered when we were laying out the classrooms. So while this would be the model center for Bright Horizons, they did also want to innovate their playground and just move away from their more traditional climbers. This was really their first transition to a more natural outdoor environment and a natural learning experience. So we wanted to provide more natural climbing equipment in the form of these large boulders, and this would help children to develop their gross motor and upper body strength. A lot of space has been provided to children to allow children to just be able to run around and build with loose parts. And over here on this top left portion is actually a shared space that can be used just for gardening and outdoor class activities, as well as events just for parents and teachers. And here are just some photos of the interior. So these top 2 here are actually during construction. The center had some existing skylights throughout, and the issue with that was actually that it also had a very high roof, and we didn't want to go all the way up to the underside of the deck as this just would have made the classrooms feel extremely tall. So we came up with a solution of dropping the ceiling and then providing a skylight that just angled out to be more open, and it helped to disperse light throughout the classroom, as you can see here. This sort of built form can kind of relate back to the Miss Irby's sky archetype that we had previously talked about in session 1, and just being able to provide children with a chance to bring the sky down to their level. The image to the right shows actually an instance where we had to be cautious where our openings to the outside would go. So the portion of the wall here that you see in the back it wasn't allowed to be penetrated at just anywhere that we wanted to. We really had to be cautious about the location for those openings because it would damage the structural integrity of the building if we came within a certain distance of any columns along the perimeter. So we wanted to provide as much natural light along the exterior as we could. So we opened the foundation walls where possible, but then we tried continuing skylights or side lights wherever the space allowed for it above that foundation wall. And in this bottom left image, you actually see the project room with the gross motor space beyond. This room essentially functions as a STEM room for just different activities, but some of those activities actually include learning about food and cooking because it's connected here to the pantry by this low wall and this low height counter. This really allowed for staff to provide an education on how their food is made and could really let the children participate as well, which we thought was really nice. And now we're just going to look at some kind of out of the box ideas. They're just alternative approaches to really what a childcare facility can be. And these are just some ideas that we've explored with LISC. And we just really, it's this idea of being able to use low cost materials or some sort of pre-manufactured or modular structure so that you can save on cost for construction and the repairs of the building and focus those funds on the actual learning environment for the children. So the benefit to doing something, oh,
I
sorry.
was just going to say, Brian, the images you see here are actually precedent images that we looked at when we did studies with IFF in Detroit on a similar exercise, looking for low cost, high quality ways to put childcare together.
Correct. After this slide, we'll see the actual conceptual designs that we came up with.
Yes, sorry.
Yep.
And I think there is as well, you know, they reuse and actually reclaim on materials that you can actually perhaps, you know, purpose for it. And actually you can get lead credits if it's that end, you know, in that end of the project when it's large child facilities. And in our case, you know, we have mix of variety, but you can actually get points for that if you could, you know, reuse materials and be able to do that and just always think about it of sick building, healthy building, into which materials you actually pick and select and what other things they can carry those materials towards to the environment where the kids are every day, and as well the people who working in it in neighborhood and environment in general. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for adding that. So yeah, and really the benefit to doing something in this method is that it can be located virtually anywhere that has the appropriately sized lot of land. So you have options or options like what you can see on the left here through the uses of Quonset huts as the structure for the classroom. Some other options really include combining shipping containers together to make a form a cluster of usable spaces. And like one method that was previously just mentioned with reusing materials is just using straw bale as a construction material, as you can see here in this precedent image. And so now you can look at one of the actual design interventions that we worked on with LISC. So sometimes lots of land will be available in ideal locations, and through the use of prefabricated structures, those lots can really be more effectively used rather than just going unused. And this is really true for uniquely shaped lots or just a small plot of land. So these structures allow for a lot of flexibility when it comes to configuration, and the modular design of the classroom allow for a lot of potential for growth in the future as well. So these classrooms can be easily connected with a corridor to turn the individual classrooms into more of a traditional childcare center. And each hut can have easy access to their own outdoor space or to a more larger communal area for, you know, educational activities or any sort of events. And sorry. So for the next portion, we looked at a similar idea just with using shipping containers. So these prefabricated structures can really make high quality childcare accessible to virtually anyone, anywhere. And whether they're provided in smaller classroom clusters, as you can see in the top left, or combined into a smaller center here in this option, neighborhoods that are deprived of access to quality education spaces can now have that opportunity for their children. And with higher enrollment comes expansion. So rural areas can be provided with spaces for learning that are easier to access, parking lots in dense urban settings to be adapted to provide education where it's in high demand, and existing terrain that may prove too difficult or expensive for traditional construction can then be used to benefit the actual outdoor learning environment for the children. So these prefabricated structures have the flexibility to really put high quality education spaces within anyone's reach.
I will say that I think in our studies, as we looked at costs in various locations, we did find that this is not a magic bullet for low cost, high quality childcare. But there are situations where, because of labor costs or because of shipping costs to remote areas, that it does really change the equation in terms of affordability. And of course, the quality piece is you're not guaranteed quality, obviously, just by using shipping containers or Quonset huts. But what it does, I think, is it allows the money that goes into the basic structural envelope of the building to be reduced, so that some of that money can be repurposed towards higher quality, towards more space, or towards more windows, or towards better quality finishes and materials.
I will add as well the fact that there depends of climate, because I know this conference is about different people and all nationwide. So other people maybe can be reuse these items and these ideas in different weather, but we are New England, so we are snow loads, we are cold, so environment conform and climate conform is kind of like some issues with this type of material. In tropicals, for example, I have been designing South America and we use bamboo. Obviously here is different complex, so I think it depends about thinking about climate, weather, solutions, materials, and technology, and my kudos for that solution for the project. Thank you for sharing with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the input. Yeah, climate in the location definitely does have a very large impact on whether something like this could really be done. So for this next example, this design intervention that we examined essentially drew inspiration from those texts that we showed you in the first session. It's proposing this idea of, well, what if the physical space was removed from the daily childcare setting and the majority of time children were in care just really took place outside? So the building, or what we're referring to it as the warming hut, would really only provide enclosure from the outdoors and plumbing facilities for the staff and children. It would primarily be used for storage during the day and as classroom setting when there's inclement weather or when it just gets colder outside, depending on the location. This concept would provide children with much more space than they would actually have indoors, and can help redefine really what a traditional classroom setting can be. And now just some last few examples. These were some low-cost solutions for existing outdoor spaces that we worked on with LISC. So these design interventions can essentially be provided anywhere for a very low price. It just requires a little bit of creativity and just some people who are willing to help elevate the children's environments. We worked with LISC and volunteers from Blue Cross to redesign a few centers' outdoor play spaces in order to provide an effective and fun environment for the children. Even something really as simple as just providing a track to run around can really be enough to spark countless hours of creativity and play. And this is a children's friend in Providence, Rhode Island. So you can see how it came after. And this was one that so our team kind of split up and each went to a different location, and I got to work on this one. But it was really great because after we finished, we got to see the children come out and use the space. And it was just really fun just seeing them kind of running around this track, even though they had the space before. They just needed a little bit of, I guess, structure to kind of spark the creativity in them.
Once again, this was sort of a one-day intervention. And
correct, yeah. And this next one here is just another space with the same sort of intervention. So this is the Nathaniel Greene Elementary School in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. At this site, you can see that the children actually had some more equipment, and we thought that it actually did have play value, so we didn't want to just eliminate it. So the problem was really the environment around these structures, and just by adding safety surfacing and some more planting and defining a path, it really changed the atmosphere of this play yard from what it was before.
Brian, do you mind if you actually comment regarding the budget and pricing that you got after the end of the project, where you approached to it in that sense, perhaps, and timing? Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, I'll jump in here. This is actually Jamestown Early Learning Center in Jamestown, Rhode Island. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island holds an initiative every year called Blue Across Rhode Island, where they deploy their staff for a one-day day of service out to centers or out to sites for a variety of different topics or projects. So there are some people that will pack, they'll pack sneakers and ship those off to families that may need them. There will be people that will work in a food kitchen or a soup kitchen and provide food for families for a day. And a couple of years ago, a couple of years in a row, the LISC Rhode Island applied to be a subrecipient of the Blue Across Rhode Island grant program. So we applied on behalf of a few centers, and that came with each site got up to $5,000 per site that they could use to purchase materials, to purchase equipment that they could use to purchase pizza for their volunteers if they wanted to. But it came along with us working with these individual centers to coordinate the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island volunteers for a day to implement these changes. So that $5,000 included all the materials, it included LISC technical assistance, and it also included funding to support the design from studioMLA to come up with a strategic low-cost plan. This resulted in us creating a program called the Outdoor Play Interventions Project, where we did these small one-time few-hour interventions on site. And we actually have a resource guide on how people can DIY some of these interventions on their own.
And here's just the last example of, or one of the other sites that we worked on with LISC. It's just one final example of how a space can really be enhanced at a very low budget. And just by expanding on the existing asphalt surfacing and providing some sensory panels for the children, you present them with a variety of environments to be able to help them develop. So spaces and types of play can be defined and activities can be consolidated to the appropriate areas. You know, this just goes to show you that you don't need to break the bank in order to provide effective outdoor environments that foster a child's development. And now we can take a moment for any questions that you may have. And if not, we can also just move forward onto another case study in a more extensive look. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Erin.
Any questions on any of these, or in any issues that they might have raised for anyone?
Yeah, a broader question about thanks. It was really interesting, and I think Erin mentioned I got to work on some of these when I was working at studioMLA, and it's really fun to see them sort of all together. If you guys do any pre and post kind of surveying or returning to sites years after installation and sort of figuring out what are your learnings, in the long term for best practices?
Oh, that's a really great question. And we have gone back to some of our sites. And I think one of the things that's always really good to have conversations with whenever you are working with a prospective provider are what are the requirements for maintenance post installation. So, I think what's really great is, and also I think having that conversation with groups about what they want their outdoor space to do or to look like, because some providers, while you can provide a multitude of loose parts and a multitude of things out on a site, who cleans it up at the end of the day? Where does it go? Does it remain a dynamic space outside? Having those conversations up front is really key, because I think at the end of the day, if there were interventions that included things like plantings, well, then who maintains the plantings and how do you operate them on an annual basis? And do they have the right ability to maintain those plantings for the course of a year? Or how do you winterize them? Paint eventually chips and fades. And so how do you continue to make those improvements from, a year to year basis? The one thing that we did see is that in the conversations that we had with anybody post intervention, that the change of the use of space was so drastic from the way that kids interpret the space and the decision-making process that they go through with how they function in the space, regardless of what was added in or what maintenance was required, improved year after year. So we haven't seen a whole lot of decay since the first installations.
I think Erin's absolutely right. And it really impacts the design a lot, having an understanding of how, what the organization's appetite for maintenance and care of a space is. Because you're almost, I think also as we tend to do more and more natural outdoor spaces, we're going down one of two pathways a lot of times. We're going down the pathway that's sort of designing defensively so that everything we plant, we're trying to plant things that are extremely hardy, child resistant, drought resistant, protected by, edging and things like that. Or we're going down a pathway where we have some level of confidence that somebody is actually going to be maintaining and caring for the plants. And then it opens up a whole other world of possibilities. And I think the example that Brian showed of the Bright Horizons quote unquote natural playground is a really good one, because we do a lot of work with them, and we've kind of been bringing them along, I think, over time in terms of making their outdoor play spaces more natural. But they are very realistic about their maintenance programs, what they can support and what they can do. And it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't allow them to do really, really natural play spaces with lots of plant material and lots of natural surfaces, because they know that they don't have a maintenance regime in place to really maintain those. I think on the other end of the spectrum, a project that Erica worked on with us as our client, actually, at the Boston Nature Center, is an amazing example of a project that every time you go back, it just gets better and better, because they take such great care of the vegetation, and they supplement it, and it's grown in amazingly. And there you really see the potential of natural outdoor play space. But then absolutely we go back to some, and you see the risk, because what was beautiful planting beds has turned into dirt and mud. But I think there's obviously a careful way to design and install and select planting materials and outdoor spaces as well. And I think it goes for the insides of buildings too. There's just a balancing act between designing a space that is hopefully aligned enough with the vision of the client and inspiring enough so that they really do take great care of it, as opposed to designing something that sort of just degrades more quickly than you would like. And we should do more post-occupancy evaluation. We as a group of people who care about children's environments should also do more teacher training around environments. I know that Robin Moore at the Natural Learning Institute in North Carolina, whenever they do a design and construction intervention, they always package that with like a year of teacher training, monthly teacher trainings that go after that, so that there's a whole long-range plan for bringing the staff up to speed on caring for the space, maintaining the space, and using the space. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, I don't see anything else in the chat. We can go ahead. I don't know, Samantha, do I have we're taking a break. So we'll give everybody, Aaron, I don't know if you can hear, we'll give everybody till 2 o'clock. You're on mute, Aaron, sorry.
And so we have a small enough group right now. We could probably take a quick 5-minute break and just get right back to it and leave people some more time at the end of the day if they'd like. If people are good with that, you can add that to the chat. Does like 1:50-ish sound good? All right, it sounds like there's consensus on that. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break. I'll actually stay on in the event that anybody wants to just chat or ask a random question that might not be totally aligned to what we're talking about now. But I'm here if anyone wants to chat.
Eddie, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. So it's Maria Rosa. Question: when the design budget can be used perhaps for furniture design, like adaptability, because in our cases, I mean, we see right now large projects, which is much easier perhaps because we will have more layaway in space and uses. The projects that we actually intended, and specifically with child home care, is quite the adaptability and flexibility of spaces. And in those cases, it's important to use furniture, maybe furniture design. So things they collapse, like things like perhaps for giving an idea, a type of like a boat design or Murphy bed, perhaps is there, but it's not there, kind of type of space. You know what I'm saying? Like a magical pop up. So things of that nature has been actually, I did promote last year with the participants. We didn't got any one of them actually got through that process completely. The people who got it, I mentioned to you earlier what happened. So this person right now, the one that we have right now, our client, is actually outdoor space. And that will be in the project that we have is more outdoors. We don't have any indoor space yet for this year. So in that sense, that will be a probability, you think, perhaps, for get budget towards to that part to build specifically things that will be flexible and useful in those types of spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that thinking about FF&E in any type of space, especially if it can be a multi-purpose, like when you're thinking about family childcare space, you're thinking about what the kids are going to be utilizing, what the fixtures and furnishings are, but how that can be something that converts to the use for the home later in the day so that it's a functioning item. I don't think it all depends on, so if you're talking specifically about a project that received a grant award for that use, typically their grant contract would have an identified number of uses for those funds. And if fixtures and furnishings are listed as that grant use, then yeah, I would say definitely thinking, if you're thinking about the outdoor space and the conversion types of components on the outdoor space to be utilized, like that would definitely be an appropriate opportunity to incorporate that onto the outdoor space. Especially with family childcare spaces, it's really hard to justify putting anything permanent, like a climbing structure of some kind, in somebody's backyard, because we just know how much space that kind of stuff takes up. So thinking about things that are flexible, can be moved, can be used inside or outside, I think is certainly an appropriate consideration.
Oh, thank you. Yes, because most likely they use the parking lot actually as part of the playground.
Well, yeah, because you want a variety of surfaces. So when you think about it from a family childcare perspective, and you're thinking about the surface use outside, you want to have safety surfacing, but you do want to integrate some of those harder surfaces so that you can have ground level activities like riding a trike or, utilizing a bicycle or a scooter of some kind, so that you have that appropriate surface for that particular activity or that gross motor skill development. So we've seen a lot of people actually modify their fencing so that they're better incorporating the asphalt pavement, so that they can have that multitude or that variety of skills that are able to be taken on while they're on the space outside.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always really interesting. I think that it's easy to think about designing new space from the ground up. I think it becomes much more problematic and becomes a much more, thoughtful consideration when we look at things like people's homes, or when we look at things like buildings that were not originally designed for childcare. It becomes such an interesting topic of conversation. And we often have to have uncomfortable conversations about what we can do and what we can get away with in the space.
Correct, because then imply the style of living and the style of likening. So it's a whole different other concept. I kind of used to it because I did work, and I have been working with the LED program in Providence. So we are all tiny people houses. So I do, like large projects, but small projects. So for me it's fun. See how you transform a space from nothing, pretty much, even though it's full of different random things sometimes.
Yeah, no, especially when it's for spaces specifically for children who feel very differently in space than adults do. So all really good stuff. I think at this point it's about time, I think, for the next section. So Mike, if you're here, we can definitely get onto the case study for the Lincoln School. He might not be back from break yet, and that's okay. So I think it's, Maria Rosa, you had mentioned that you were doing, I think, tiny houses in space too. And I think tiny houses have started to really help people think about creative storage uses of space, which
Totally.
which I'm really hoping to implement more of in childcare space design, because there just isn't enough storage capacity in a lot of even just like large buildings for some of the stuff that childcare centers need. So I'd be interested in the future to hear about some of the things that you have, certainly offline, some of the things that you have developed and designed as part of your way to come up with some space saving, flexible uses that exist in those types of very small spaces.
Yes, we have to have a chat and I can show portfolio. We can just chit chat about that. Yes, actually, I have been, my first approach was with the participation with the Narragansett High School. So I did elementary, middle, and high school. I was working back then with Dorado Architects. So I was the head project architect for those projects, and I was in charge of those projects from the design part, and then after to oversee construction with Demio Construction. And then I did Block Island Airport, and then the hangars, and Downland Village. And it has been a variety of projects, not only education projects. I've been from hospitals to luxury houses, to very humble houses, pretty much with nothing, to be very resourceful as to you have to design from really honestly whatever you have in your environment, like a make your own brick. And I teach the kids and the people how to make their own brick and use bamboo surfaces. We have a project and that's for free. And we working in anything that we actually, all the projects that the company work on, we have part of those resources shipped to projects in Colombia, in Cali, Colombia, and another city close to Bolivar in Colombia, and in Africa, because there are children's education, there are children's facilities, especially the Africa is orphans from AIDS. So we're very happy every time we receive a project because we know we helping others too.
Thank you. So Mike, do you happen to be back now?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Sorry, I was waiting for that to wrap up.
Nope, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much, Mike.
Let me just make sure I can start video. There I am. My controls got a little confused there. So we're going to walk through one final case study that we've recently completed in Providence. And I wanted to sort of use it to try to tie up a lot of the different pieces that we've talked about today. I think that certainly we, when we came to this project, this is at the Lincoln School on the east side of Providence. And when we came to the Lincoln School, I think we had our own framework for designing children's environments that we've sort of developed over the years, the basis of which we've shared quite a bit of with you today. And then layered on top of that was the background and where the Lincoln School is coming from. So the Lincoln School is a Quaker origin girls' school in Providence, although the early education program is co-ed until after preschool, and then they kick the boys out. They're very dedicated to their early education program, both because it's a very super high quality program. It's been around for a really long time. A lot of the students and alumni have gone through it, but also because it's sort of their pipeline. It's their lifeline to, bringing students to the school. So it's important. This is a shot that shows you basically their whole campus. It's a collection of buildings that are, more or less architecturally distinguished, but have been around for a long time. And they're relatively simple. It's a beautiful campus. It's backs up to conservation land. And some of the things about their Quaker heritage that are come out really strongly in what they're looking for and talking about is just a dedication to simplicity and to stewardship of the environment, and just a kind of a natural, simple communitarian approach to things. So they've done a couple of things recently, one of which I saw someone from LLB Architects on the Zoom call this morning. I don't know if you're still around, but was this steam hub that was added to essentially the face of the main building. So the street frontage, but I'll back up here. It's actually over here. So Main Street goes by here, and this is where you see the steam hub. And I think a lot of the design of this building was around a new sort of what the Lincoln School how it wants to present itself going into the 21st century as a school grounded in tradition, but that's open to innovation. And so it's got this very modern steam addition on the front of it. Quaker faith has a long tradition of architecture, both in England and in the US. Very simple buildings. And so one of the interesting things that we kicked around with the Lincoln School was, so what does it mean to have a Quaker architecture for the 21st century? What would that look like? And how would that work in a place for children? Because what they came to us for was a new building for early education, a small building to supplement. They weren't going to close down their existing site, but they wanted to supplement it, and they wanted to use it to kind of tie the campus together. So the existing Child Care Center is here. They needed more space. We looked at various different locations around the campus and settled on this hexagon here, not hexagon, this whatever it is, quadrilateral, not a quadrilateral. What is that shape? This polygon, labeled #1 preferred site. And they chose that partly because it was kind of between the existing Child Care Center and the lower school, which is their elementary school over here. Partly because along this residential street, it allowed us to put up another building that is sort of the new face of the Lincoln School. And partly because it was a space that allowed for really the highest quality facility in terms of the connection of indoors and outdoors. This is the existing lower school building, which is right here, the elementary school. It's an L-shaped building, but this is the facade along here. They call it the motel. You can see why, kind of. And so part of the other strategy in siting the building here was the idea that you would kind of shield this building from view. And then eventually in a potential phase 2, this would actually get this building would get a facelift. And that would be, as you can see, maybe. So here's the plan. This is the existing lower school, that facade we were looking at. This is the piece of land that we're talking about. This is the proposal for the expanded little school, which is what they call their early education facility. And then the idea was that there would be a phase 2 expansion that would put a new facade on this lower school piece, as well as an addition that would include library and lower school STEAM and STEM activities, and create this courtyard. This is what the floor plan looks like. Once again, put back to the site plan. It's kind of got this L shape that creates this courtyard, outdoor play space on the end. The plan is very simple. So they, in addition to their Quaker heritage, they're a Reggio Emilia inspired program. So we talked a little bit about this morning. Reggio Emilia is a small town in the north of Italy that is has now, worldwide sort of inspired programs to, it's not a curriculum so much as it is an approach and a series of practices. And they've been using this for upwards of 15 years now. And so they have a couple of features of the things we talked about this morning. One is a piazza or a central gathering space. The other is an atelier or studio project space. And then essentially there are only 2 classrooms, both of which give out onto this outdoor space. One of the nice things I think about this project is that it's so small that it's really easy to sort of illustrate the kinds of principles that we've been talking about in terms of ample space, natural light and ventilation, direct connection to the outside, just being conscious and mindful about what your building does to the site, what kinds of spaces it creates, and the layouts of the classrooms and communication, and having multifunctional space that you can use and dedicated space for teachers and projects, etc. And this is a view kind of looking back into the courtyard. We just have a couple of photographs here. Of course, the last one's at dark because architects like to see their buildings in the dark, I guess. And then we've actually, with the help of Aaron and LISC, over the last 2 months, we put together a video of the center and the campus, which we'll show you now. And then hopefully that'll lead us into a good discussion about both this project, but everything else we've talked about today. So Samantha, you're taking it over from here on the video.
Yes, just give me 1 second. Let me know if you can hear this when it starts playing.
Collaborating with the Lincoln School started really with a conversation with Dave Caldwell from the Lincoln School Board. And he was very excited about the opportunity of exploring a highly sustainable building for the early education program that could also do other things on the campus. They had gone through a master planning process a couple of years ago, but this was sort of a new project that hadn't been taken into account. And they knew that the siting of it was incredibly important. So we explored multiple site options in terms of where to actually place the new building. The one we settled on links the existing childcare center to the existing lower school. It really ties the campus to the neighborhood with a residential scale building. And finally, it creates this really nice courtyard space, which is sheltered and becomes a new center and a new hub for the campus.
Lincoln School is traditionally a Quaker school by its founding, and there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability. The Reggio Emilia curriculum, the program, is derived from the countrysides of Italy. A lot of embracing of the natural environment and how that affects how we live, how we work, how we learn.
At the scale of the campus, we were really trying to help create a new outdoor space that linked the younger children with the elementary school. We were trying to give this piece of the campus a more coherent look and put a building on this side of the campus that reflected both the scale of the neighborhood, the ethos of the school in terms of simplicity and connectedness, community, and sustainability. The Quaker heritage of the Lincoln School puts a lot of emphasis on environmental stewardship, emphasis on simplicity and on community. So we really took those to heart. Those are aligned with our values in terms of every building that we design. So I think it was a great partnership, and we really tried to reflect those in every aspect of the building, from the overall building layout, the materiality, the detailing, and the fact that this is a LEED certified building and a net zero energy building.
I think it's really important that we design a space that the children can own themselves, and also one that's a healthy environment. So this plays into a lot of the sustainability efforts that we do in all our projects. Part of working at studioMLA, you're taught the foundation of designing for children basics, just understanding from the child's perspective that everything is down low. So when we're thinking about the height of windows. It's important to think, well, a child may want to look out a window, and so we need to set it down lower so they can do that. Or in terms of teacher visibility, it's important to make sure that the teacher has total eyesight over the entire classroom. And so it's little things like this that really help influence the design of the classrooms and the overall building.
This is our piazza. It is our gathering place for events. It is where our families drop off.
In Reggio Emilia-inspired schools, the piazza is the heart of the center. This is the community space, it's the multi-purpose space, it's where lots and lots of activities happen. It's also, in our case, it's analogous to the Quaker idea of the meeting space, which was very important for the Lincoln School.
This space was originally designed to be a Reggio studio for small groups of students to work with incredibly messy materials, materials that are delicate, that need to happen in very small groups, but we have been using this as a classroom.
We have ample space in the classrooms, lots of natural light and natural ventilation and fresh air, and that the classrooms connect directly to the outdoors. All of those things made it really easy to convert to a safer operating mode during COVID. And we're really excited about the final form that this space will take. This program has done a great job with their existing art studio, thinking really hard about how color, light, and materiality all come together in the space. This is a great illustration of the concept of sensoryscapes.
The design in both of our spaces, it is the same layout and floor and print here. All of our classrooms spill out into the playground.
It has all different components in it that serve a variety of needs and goals for the children. The surfacing is designed so that little kids that are still new at walking can fall and get back up because they didn't get really hurt. So they will fall, and that's okay. And the surfaces are soft and squishy. The whole space is designed to be really open-ended and to give the kids an opportunity to practice lots of different skills. So the plant palette in the play area is a mix of native and non-native vegetation. So the trees are native river birches, and those are really great for playgrounds because they have peely bark that kids can touch and play with and peel off. They're red twig dogwood shrubs, so when they lose their leaves, you still have the really fun red twigs left in the winter. We have some evergreen inkberry shrubs, which are also native to Rhode Island. They have little green, shiny leaves, and they last all year. They really wanted the play space to be a nature-based play space to go along with their curriculum that they use inside. So that the play space wouldn't just be a playground that they use intermittently, it would really be a cohesive part of their program here. It's great to see kids using the space because no matter what, they will use the space in a way that you didn't think of, and it's kind of amazing.
Over the fence encounters happen all the time. If they're not climbing up to watch, the children on the other side are knocking at the gate for us to open so that they can share a hello or just know what's happening.
So the courtyard that's created between the little school and the lower school, previously open front lawn, now it's protected, sheltered, it has a lot more definition. So now we have a courtyard space that can be used for all kinds of different activities, different age children playing together, coming together, parent gatherings, performance. There's a lot of things that happen in this space that probably wouldn't have happened in just on the front lawn previously. The courtyard will really be activated when phase 2 of this project happens. We would replace the facade that faces the courtyard, and behind it would be a 2-level library and STEM space for the elementary school.
We use this space in so many different ways. We actually put an outdoor carpet out here and we use it for morning meeting. They take stories on the porch. They have library once a week, so often their class will happen out here. Parents will meet out here with teachers, so we use the space in many different ways.
One of the defining architectural features of the building is this large overhanging roof. and it performs quite a few functions. One is it just protects the people along the perimeter of the building. It makes the passage from inside to outside feel more connected and less abrupt, and that also is enhanced by the materiality of the ceiling, the wood soffit under that roof overhang, so that you really feel like you're still in a part of the building even when you're right outside the building.
Everyone loves beautiful space. Children deserve beautiful space to work in. Teachers deserve beautiful space designed for its purpose, and that is exactly what we have in this building.
So thank you. And thanks, Erin. That was a really cool video that you helped us to make. That was.
I had the pleasure, probably, I don't know, this was a quick turnaround as far as the video goes. It was about, maybe 6 weeks ago or so that we actually walked around the site for the first time with the videographer. And I've had the pleasure of being in a lot of childcare spaces across the state of Rhode Island. And this one really took my breath away because it wasn't really something that you didn't know where it was until you walked upon it. And you just kind of happened upon this space. And it really shows that its scale, its size, the materials that were used were all meant for children. And it's such a rarity to see a space that's just specifically designed for kids that have the benefit of, enjoyment by adults as well. So it was a great opportunity. And I mean, thank goodness for designers like you who focus on developing spaces for our youngest people in Rhode Island.
Well, I think we all have a range of opportunities, and this one just happened to be a really good opportunity that all the pieces came together really well. And like I said, I think the fact that it was small just made it easier to manage and to how it come out, right? And the Lincoln School was a great partner on it as well. And they were, they have certain resources that they could put towards a building too that not everybody has. So.
Can you remind me of the total development cost for this particular project and kind of the timeline for construction?
So the total project budget was just under $5 million, which is including the solar array, including redoing quite a bit of the parking and some of the sewer infrastructure and the roadway that's adjacent to it, and all of the soft costs. They did a land swap with the city of Providence. And so it was a relatively complicated for a small building, but it was a piece of their campus that they kind of wanted to straighten out. And the construction schedule happening over COVID was about a year, a little bit less.
No, thanks. So I think with that, we're definitely under the time that we had, which is fantastic. So we can give people back the rest of their day, but definitely want to take a moment for anybody who we didn't do introductions other than having people say their name in the chat. But if people want to just introduce who they are and talk a little bit about what they do, this architect training was originally incepted to try to just engage the design community specifically around the things that we have at LISC going on around the state relative to childcare facilities, so that we're developing a collaboration and a partnership with anybody who would be invested in the development of space for kiddos. And, we were lucky enough to have not just architects, but to have other people from across the country through CDFIs or through other technical assistance intermediaries join us today. I see somebody turn on their video, so if somebody wants to introduce who they are and talk.
Erin, before we start, I wanted to correct myself. Somebody just sent me to 3 million, not 5 million. Sorry.
3 million. I remember, I feel like you and I talked about this.
Right. Yeah.
And that was, and it's a 2 classroom space, but I remember thinking that for the look of it, it was, $3 million is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of construction, it feels so much less costly than other developments that we've seen. I see a hand raised.
Yeah, Hi, I'm Kathy Tama. I'm out in California Bay Area. I'm a facility design consultant, and I've been doing this since the early 90s for children's centers. I just want to know, what's the square footage?
It's about 4,200 square feet, I believe.
And the number of children that are in there, it's like 20, 16?
So there's, right now, because they're using the studio space as a classroom,
yeah,
there's 26, I believe.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us from the West Coast. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah.
Yeah, very lovely center.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is the first of a couple of videos that are being developed specifically about this space. So we will be sharing those both on our website and I think through studioMLAs, and we'll be sharing those out because as somebody I know who works in advocacy and trying to convince people to invest in dollars for childcare spaces, having the image is so incredibly crucial to show what can be done in good spaces, because so often we can see spaces that we know that there are a lot of bad spaces and unfortunate spaces that children are in, but when you can showcase something that is, I think, a relatively affordable building that is sustainable, that fits in an urban site context, I think that that starts to tell the story of why investment in space is going to be so critical.
And this does highlight, Aaron, we should pull together really more detailed information on budget, schedule, capacity, square footage, all that, so that we've got that, we make sure it's right and everything. But, and it is, you know, we always try to show a range of centers in terms of budget and outcomes. I think it is good to show things that are understandable and manageable and small enough where you can actually see sort of the principles put into practice in a clean way.
I see somebody from Build Up took off their video. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
I joined a little late this morning, so I didn't get the chance to pop it in the chat, but my name is Pamela Campos, and I am a technical assistance coordinator with Build Up San Mateo County, which is an initiative in the San Francisco Bay Area, specifically with the mission of enhancing the quality and increasing the supply of early care and education spaces in the county of San Mateo. So I am super grateful for this training today because I learned a lot. It was really helpful, and especially that video. I am actually in a project where I'm working on a film myself, trying to highlight a local facility. And so it was really, really nice to see a lot of examples and a lot of the reasons behind why it really makes the case for, as you said, the investment. So thank you.
I really think we learned a lot doing the video, because I think we've made little video clips before of buildings, but we've never, and like I said, thanks to Aaron and LISC for kind of pushing us to actually try to explain the building in a video, because it's not that easy. And I think we learned a lot by going through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so critical to be able to describe succinctly why a space is, and it's hard, like, because not everyone's going to listen to me drone on about the childcare regulations and the nuances in childcare design and why it's so particularly different than any other type of construction. But when you can show something visually in that way, I think it makes a big difference, and you can promote something without even saying anything.
Yeah, I want to say it was great. In fact, I want to get the name of your videographer because we're doing something like that here. I work with Build Up San Mateo County and Build Up California, and actually, live here in California. And it was great to see how you were able to touch on the best practices in facility design, such as the daylighting and the ventilation and having visual access and connectiveness and community to the rest of the environment that they're sitting in. And also all the, child height sinks and everything at the appropriate size. So I think you did an excellent job in that, because it's very hard to do.
Well, at this point, we should probably introduce Samantha, who's been working like crazy on the video. Say hi, Sam.
Hello, I'm putting the videographer's information in the chat.
Oh, okay.
He's great. He works with the Red Sox as well. It was a really fun project to do. I'm in marketing, so this is my first time. I'm still trying to learn what to capture in a video, what to capture in photos, to explain the whole architecture design process. And it was really fun. But I just put his information in the chat if he did want it.
Yeah, so I certainly, want to open it up if people have any particular questions, whether it's about this particular case study, if there are, if there are some things that people are thinking about or projects that they're pursuing either in the state of Rhode Island or across the country, or if there are some things, or if people want to even just let us know if they're interested in advocacy efforts and ways to help promote this conversation at a level at which funding can come in from federal or state resources. Again, I announced a little bit earlier, for people who didn't join in on the lunchtime conversation, Rhode Island has successfully voted on a early learning facilities bond that provides dollars to the state to make high quality investments in the space, whether it is through health and safety improvements or large scale improvements, renovations, or construction. And we're really excited that's likely going to be rolling out next year. And we're building up our pipeline at the moment for groups hiring architects to start developing those spaces. So for any of the architects that are here on the line today, we really appreciate that as well. And you working with our groups, which, from a client perspective, and we didn't really touch on this, but, childcare providers never went into the business to become real estate developers. And so there is another component to working with a childcare provider from a design perspective that includes a lot of technical assistance and does require kind of more educational work than just developing a space based on a program, which is a really important, I think, aspect specific to childcare design.
I can introduce myself. I'm Erica Quigley. My firm is Gardens for Life, and we offer design, implementation, maintenance consulting, and the educational piece that Mike had mentioned that the Natural Learning Initiative also offers, because I think that's a really key part of getting the buy-in and getting the spaces used the way that the designers intend. I'm very interested in the sort of middle ground. We saw the tactical, like quick and dirty, let's get it done in a day, that really inspires people to think differently about their space. And we're seeing, the other end, the very high end, sort of wonderful investments of beautiful spaces. And I would love to kind of draw people in, draw clients in with those easy wins and say, look, this is what you can achieve. Let's try it out. And sort of like the streetscape tactical urbanism way that worked, folks have been working on forever, but I think during COVID, everybody suddenly saw like, oh, wow, we can't just put chairs in the street and, the sky doesn't fall. And so we would like to do sort of an equivalent thing for childcare centers, but then take it to the next step where, if a center only has $10,000 or $20,000 to spend, what can you do with, a lot of play value and a lot of sort of sweat equity to get a wonderful space? I
think that's a really good question, Eric. I mean, the two things that I feel strongly would help, and one specifically for outdoor spaces and one just generally. Specifically for outdoor spaces, I think to encourage the kind of practice that you have where it's kind of, design, build, implement, right? Which is regionally, they're like in where Robin Moore is in North Carolina, there are 3 companies that basically do that for natural playgrounds. And natural playgrounds are so difficult to draw and document. And, you can't, it's hard to say, really specifically, Mr. Contractor or Ms. Contractor, go to the woods, find a really cool log, chop it up, sand it down, bring it over here and place it exactly right? But I think there are people who really are good at that and love to do it. And so I think developing a market for that would really address that middle ground, I think, in a really substantial way. And then on the funding side, having like that size grant that was sort of set up for that. So it's like, here's $25,000 to go naturalize this part of your preschool area, something like that. I think that's one possibility. The other piece, though, that I think applies to all different kinds of design for children is the idea of actually finding and documenting and spreading the word on sort of pilot projects, right? So I think that could be anywhere from finding a really well adapted in-home childcare setting, which is, the person who's doing it has just done an amazing job, and just be able to show that to other people, to finding a low cost building type that works and is replicable, to finding a really interesting renovation in a strip mall or something like that. Because I think there's Aaron's really right. I think being able to see it and maybe not touch it and feel it these days, but at least be able to see it. And so I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about the video about too, is I think it seems like a really good medium for kind of getting people excited about here's what you could do, just sort of inspiring people too.
And Mike, that reminds me that, a number of years back when we started the outdoor play interventions, we had always toyed around with, what if we had funding available to do interior design interventions? Like what are the big impact, very low cost things you can do? Something as simple as, I think about the first presentation that you gave where it was, you don't need a lot of bright colors. So if you mute the wall tone in the space, but then you add larger windows, or you even just replace one window with a low level window for kiddos to see outside, all of a sudden the dynamics in the space have totally changed because you're engaged at a very different level. Mm-hmm. So I always think about the fun projects when there's funding available to do things like that, because that does, like, what are the things, like what is the cost of just painting? Painting is actually really expensive, but can have an enormous impact on the view of a space.
I wanted to ask a question, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked with many architects and many engineers and developers and contractors and agencies and childcare providers. And you're absolutely right, Erin. It is extremely difficult for staff to be able to translate program requirements into architectural specifications. That's something we should never expect them to be able to do. But at the same time, I want to ask Mike, because that's like part of my job is to work with architects and do a lot of training with them on best practice design criteria. Did you have somebody helping you? Because how did your staff get it all? Because that's usually not my experience. There's a couple of architects that I've been working with for the past 20 years that, they get it. They're really good. But usually most architects don't have that understanding of what the program needs are.
So we have a kind of unique history, I guess, as a firm. We started out, I started out as the in-house architect at Bright Horizons in 1996. Got it. And I worked then for 7 years with Jim Greenman on lots and lots of projects, and we taught together. And so then we spun off and became studioMLA in 2006, and have been, early education has been a core part of what we do since then. So we've sort of been immersed in it for a long time. But it's a great question, because we have, just like this, we've done sort of capacity building workshops and exercises in places from, Northern Ireland to India to Detroit. And I think it's you can talk about it and you can show pictures, but I think people have to go through the process. I think you actually have to go design and build centers. And the same is true with contractors and landscape contractors. And there's only so much you can learn, and then you have to do it. And so you need opportunities to do it. But I think the next best thing is having a collection of things that you can go see and visit, right? I mean, I think the first advice we give people who are starting a new project with an architect that's not necessarily very experienced in early education is to take them around and show them early education facilities that you like and you think function well and you think work, so.
That's great. I used to know Jim way back in the 90s.
Yeah, I have to say, and we're pretty lucky here in Rhode Island that, Mike is not only kind of a internationally recognized designer for early childhood spaces, but that he clearly cares about the philosophy and the mission of making sure that there are other designers and architects prepped for this, so that we can leverage his design expertise and his team's design expertise to conduct trainings like this that continue on. So, Mike, you've been a partner with LISC for as long as I can remember, and certainly well before I was even at LISC. And I think that that's important too, is that, having architects interested in this space and attending things like this and just being willing to learn about it, because I started as a commercial architect. And it wasn't until I started working at LISC that I actually understood the nuances and the specialty nature of space just dedicated for childcare and for children, and why it's such a vastly different type of design process. And not every architect knows that there are special regulations for childcare. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I think that is the biggest thing, that the number one issue that we have seen when we review plans. So we work in partnership with the Department of Human Services, where we help review design plans when they come in. Actually, the Lincoln School was one that I was able to look at from that perspective when it came into the state of Rhode Island. And quite often it's just that the designs first pass don't reference or refer to or respond to any of the regulations in childcare licensing. So it's as simple as like having that initial conversation with your architect up front and giving them the childcare regulations in the area that they're working makes a huge difference.
Well, even because in California, our licensing requirements for the physical facility are very minimal, but it's being able to hit all the others, which comes with the state QRIS system. And they have requirements that, pushes the standard up. And plus, we're at the state level, we're trying to push. And also, with my part of the Bipartisan Policy Centers, Early Learning Task Force, and also the National Children's Facility Network, I'm trying to push best practices, because at least here in California, it's just minimal health and safety. We're talking minimal.
Well, I'm also not sure that there are, and maybe I'm wrong, or maybe you know this, but I'm not sure that there are a lot of people around on the East Coast doing what you're doing in terms of consulting and kind of making a link between operations and facilities. I mean, I guess there's Linda Mills, does stuff in Massachusetts, but mostly she does it nationwide. I don't know if a lot of that kind of technical support comes through the CDFIs, I think, right? And comes through LISC or comes through the Children's Investment Fund in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it is. I just have a real unique experience, because I used to actually have a BS in child development, early childhood education and was a teacher's aide teacher, lead teacher, curriculum coordinator, director, ran agencies, but I also have an MBA and was pretty big in corporate childcare in the early 90s, Pacific Gas and Electric, the World Bank. I did all of Google's. So that I have like that different experiences of actually being in the classroom. Plus I taught at a university lab school. So I know the theory, I know how to implement it, but then I also know how to build it and construction. I know all the issues, and especially when you were so lucky because that's a new construction. And so often most of mine are I'm trying to fit something into an existing space. And it's very hard, very hard, which you would know. You find so many surprises, or even now I'm doing a lot within affordable housing in the California, putting full-blown centers, not just individual classrooms in. And it's very hard because they give you a footprint that is designed to have residential units on top of it. And so you get some really odd shapes that you really have to squeeze something into.
Yeah, I think at least on the plus side, because we're hearing so much momentum from the federal level and CDFI specifically being called out, that there is that hyper awareness of the technical assistance aspect that you obviously bring forth. It's such a crucial, it's hard to describe how crucial of a component that bridging is between the design professional and the owner or the operator of the childcare space. So, but San Mateo County and California in general has had so many kind of great initiatives, and there's a lot of really good momentum, and it's been great to kind of watch to see how that unfolds for a group like us who's like watching what's happening and what the assessment is looking like and what the improvements being made are and the investments from the state. You're muted.
You have such great publications for facilities. You've had them for a long time, but just recently, the Bipartisan Policy Center has put out design, best practices for design for children center out, and also for family care homes. So, and I'm hoping that becomes something that states can start looking at, and because it's not from an individual state, it's nationally, that it might get more acceptance.
No, I mean, that's a great point, right? The second that it becomes state specific, you lose that integrity, and it varies from state to state. So,
especially California, they kind of think we're nuts out here.
No, I'm so with you. I'm in you're in the biggest state and I'm in the smallest state.
I have to say, I mean, your initiatives are super high quality. I love working with Cindy, and she is so on top of it.
Oh yeah, well, Cindy's the reason that the Child Care Facilities Fund, so for everybody who's listening, Cindy Larson was the former deputy director of LISC Rhode Island and also the founder of the Child Care Facilities Fund, who is now at the director of childcare for LISC National, which means she's now overseeing all of the LISC offices across the country. And this is something that she has really incepted for a very long time in bringing high quality care. So all of this stuff that we're hearing at the federal level is really decades and decades of all of the hard work that you guys have been doing and that Cindy's been doing. And so it seems to be we're in the right time right now for focusing on our facilities.
Yes, I'm very hopeful. In California, we have a facilities grant program. It's large because it's the first time we've had anything. It's $250 million, but to me, that's very small because of all the work that has to be done. I'm very realistic on what it costs to do construction, and but hopefully we can get some grants out and get that process working, and so we could have lessons learned. If we can get that bill out of Ways and Means and get that passed.
Oh yeah, agreed. And we're excited about that, and that's why we're trying, at least on our end, to even bolster our designers to be on the ready for funds that can.
Right. Well, we ought to get LISC and LIF and some other CDFIs together and to make some super technical training, because people do need that. I mean, I just had one center that was just completed, and the architect decided to change the heights of the low walls because he thought they looked better higher. And by the time I found out, he just did it on site. And I'm just sitting there, why did you do that?
Oh, I think I lost your audio for a second.
Kathy, I think you got muted somehow.
And her mute button's not on.
Well,
I'm sorry, we lost you in like the second half.
I half walls.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
You're
you
back.
went out for a couple of minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The last thing that we heard was that you were talking about the architect coming in and modifying the height of the wall because he felt like it looked better when it was higher up, even though he wasn't thinking about the relationship to the child in the space with the wall over their heads.
Well, yeah, and it was for the teachers, because then in the classrooms, in the design that Mike has, it was like a teacher support area within the classroom. So it was shared, and there's also a space in there I usually like to put. So not only is there a dishwasher and a sink and refrigerator, but there's also some desk space. And so they can, do documentation and stuff in there. But you need to be able, when you're sitting down, to look over the wall into the classroom. So during nap times and things, you can be in there. And they were so high, you'd have to be on a stool to see over it. So, yeah.
So I'm curious about Build Up San Mateo County. You don't actually build and operate centers, right? You're consulting to and supporting new centers or existing centers who want to expand and improve?
Yeah, so I can share about my role as the technical assistance coordinator. What I do is I provide guidance to a variety of stakeholders who are interested in developing childcare spaces, whether it's a real estate developer or an employer, a faith-based organization, a school district, et cetera. Anyone who doesn't quite have that experience can reach out to us, and we can talk to them about licensing and fire department and planning and all that kind of stuff.
Great.
They do a very good, a really great service, because they're actually able to give them a snapshot of this is what has to happen for you to do this. You need this, you need that. Talks about change use permits, talks about, just there are license requirements and what the basics are and how to get that information. And so it's a very wonderful service that they provide.
Well, that's a very challenging real estate market too, right? I mean, just to find space or.
Extremely.
I think when I saw that timeline that was posted that said 5 years is reasonable, I was wondering how much of that is searching for a site, because we've had some folks who have 2 years, more or less, just finding and acquiring the site.
Yeah, that timeline included the amount of times that people would go into a space, go through a conceptual design, determine that it doesn't meet the right environmental assessment, it doesn't pass a phase 1, it's not going to work, it's not going to yield the right number of kids, and they have to move on to the next space. I'm glad that you called it reasonable, though, because most people don't think it's reasonable when I say we need 5 years minimum to be thinking about a thoughtfully developed space. But if we talk about it enough in that way, people might start to latch on. And the one thing that we really do also try to think about is it's okay for people to go through that process and to have a failed site, right? To go through the process and design a space and to have go through a feasibility study and then determine it doesn't work, because it's so much worse when they move forward without knowing that information and investing the funds and then realizing that they're on a contaminated site, or realizing that the site doesn't actually work, or having to close in a year because it's not sustainable. But yeah, it does include that acquisition or that multiple acquisition time.
I think things are easier on the East Coast though long-term, because I think finding a site is not as hard, and then getting it all permitted and completed is not as hard as it is where you are. You have the worst of the worst of the worst, I think.
I mean, I have seen projects where they pay the architect. They've been working with the planning department in a specific city. So it's down in San Jose, and they were just at the final parts of getting their change of use permit. And then they had to go in front of the planning committee, and they nixed it.
Yeah.
And they had spent like $60,000 out of pocket.
I don't know if you're familiar with the primary school in East Palo Alto, but we did a little work with Meredith Vu, who's from Boston, actually. Yeah. When we were first starting out, and I think they're still not open. I mean, it's been 5 or 6 years now. It's crazy.
I did some initial consulting with them too, opening up their temporary site, and they were thinking about what was going to happen. Yeah, it's their piece of land and where they wanted to put it just was so many challenges with that site.
Well, this was a really great kind of end to the discussion. I appreciate hearing everybody's experiences, because I know that the things that we're all struggling with, everybody is at a different level. So this is great. I definitely want to continue these conversations, especially with our other kind of CDFIs and organizations that are working in this intermediary level. But with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you to ask final questions and wrap up. And then, certainly I'll put my email in the chat for anybody who has any other follow-up questions or just wants to connect for any purpose relative to the facilities. I'm happy to do that. And again, I just want to take the time to say thank you so much. Appreciate, this was a long session, right? We spent all day together on Zoom, which is not really always the most exciting or fun thing to do, but appreciate kind of the interest and the time that you guys spent in working on this. It looks like we have one more question. So I'll put our contact information in, and then Mike, maybe you can take the question.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and send my email information out as well. And then, yeah, thanks everybody for attending. And Maria Rosa, one more question.
Hi, how are you, everybody? How are you? So nice to meet you. Finally, we can see each other. So basically, my thankful for all of you for a great work, for an excellent conference. It's the best time I can be able to use my time and spend a day with you guys. I have been thrilled with you, with the Brian work, so Mike and Erin and Samantha videography qualities, and putting together all the chat, and an incredible effort, an incredible group effort. I'm so excited to be part of you guys and helping you. If you need any advocates for that part, I'm kind of well connected with them, so I can make things happen in Dying if you need it. And in my humble, Mike, I will be your student. You do actually a great work. I love your job. I love what you have been done in the school. I know the facility actually before the job, the work that you perform. I have been able to get there when my daughter was little. Now she's like 19, going to university, almost 20. But I did visit in their facilities way back to that time. She didn't school there, but it's an excellent facility. And in fact, I'm very thrilled about how you actually take in consideration their context, because Quaker culture is totally different than other type of items, how you approach the client, because they have a different way and manner to conduct meetings, different way and manner to select and do actually decisions, and the meeting and community type. So it's more challenging perhaps because it's not the usual way of doing things for the majority of people. So my kudos for you, big time.
Well, thank you very much. Patience, did I see you had your hand up?
Yes, I do have the question is basically, I want to know how much you guys involved with the general contractors. In my case, that's how I perform as a designing general contractor. And most of that is in how you guys communicate, how you guys do open bids for this type of projects in the large size. That would be pretty much my question. Thank you.
Sure. So, so in terms of contracting, I think there's a lot of different methods, both regionally and depending on the project delivery system. The Lincoln School project was negotiated and with I think they got bids on fees and general conditions from 3 contractors that they thought were a good fit for the project, and they selected one, and then they worked with them to negotiate a price. And in that case, and in this market where contractors are pretty busy, that's probably a pretty reasonable way to approach it. I think in some other markets and some public projects, there'll be bidding requirements where things have to be public bid and competitively bid. But we've found, because we do other kinds of projects, but we found that working with contractors on childcare projects, if you can get them at the table and get them to understand that it's a good cause and it's going to be a interesting project and a good project, and you try to go meet them halfway. We've had a lot of good luck, I think, with contractors and getting successful outcomes. So.
Well, it's just because of the fact that sometimes they use, it's an open broad of contractors and no hand-picking contractors. And it is like the way to build up in communication. Not every contractor has the same skills. Not every contractor has the same performance. Neither one schooling or acknowledge perhaps towards or respect for the architect or for the engineer's purpose. And that's become challenging. So communications wise, bidding wise, budget wise, things of those constraints, time wise, sometimes the contractors take great, but they don't have enough time to be able to do the job themselves so they can,
Well, it's good to know that you and your company are out there. We'll have to keep you in mind in Rhode Island. Yes.
Yes, definitely up there. And we willing to help you on anything that you need. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or thoughts that people want to share?
I did. It piqued my interest when you had mentioned working with, I believe it was affordable housing for single mothers. So a facility that's like, that specific. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about it, if there was any like financial reason why that structure was built, or a need from the community, or just how a community came to have that.
So that's interesting. That was an existing nonprofit structure called the Elizabeth Stone House that has existed in Boston, I think, for 40 or 50 years actually. And so we just helped them with their new facility. So the actual structure was already in place, but it is interesting because the childcare piece of it actually grew from a very informal kind of network of shared care for children within the housing unit to something where the organization actually hired originally, I think, just one teacher. And then it grew to a point where they actually had, and I want to say it was an unlicensed drop-in program, but it had over 20 children in it. And so then they got their existing facility licensed, but it had all kinds of problems. And they did a big capital campaign and built a new building with both housing, additional housing, and then they were able to build a purpose-built childcare center within the housing complex. So they, but it was certainly really important to their overall program, because a lot of the mothers are going through either training or job search or, you know, things where they need childcare. So it was just really great for them to have it on site, and also to have, they have really flexible hours too. So they have evening care and things like that, and care for older children after school, all of that. So no, it was a great program. Yeah. The other one we're doing is less, it's more of a, it's actually a new partnership between the Portland, Maine Housing Authority and a nonprofit called Youth and Family Outreach, which has been there for a long time too. But Youth and Family Outreach actually wanted to expand their program. They purchased an adjacent building that they were going to tear down, but they realized that they couldn't really raise the money. So they partnered with Portland Housing Authority, who is building a 6-story housing project on the site with the childcare on the ground floor. So it's been, so far it's a win-win for everybody, because, and now they're really well positioned because now there are more funds available for sort of shovel-ready projects, and this project is ready to go. So it hasn't, that one hasn't been built yet, but the other one, the Stonehouse project, just opened. So.
Ooh, okay, that brings up another question if there's a moment, but you said shovel-ready, so I'm just curious, what is your definition of shovel-ready?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's whatever you can convince someone is shovel ready, right? I think I would say that if you should be submitted for your building permit, right? You should be waiting for your building permit. But I think most funding sources have some kind of a range too, right? I think if you could say we'll be in the ground within a year, that would satisfy, everybody would be thrilled, right? Pretty much. And I think I think in California, the entitlements are the huge hang up, right? It's not here. There are issues sometimes with entitlements, and sometimes projects take longer than others, but it's a year. It's not 5 years. So. Kathy, I can't hear you. You're semi-muted.
Sorry. I'd say it's 2 years here. I mean, that's if you're in, or even if you have your permits and you're just waiting to finish the funding.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say having something in for building permit or having permits ready, because then the other reviews take place at that time, and then the bids take place at that time. And I think that what we're seeing too is that there is just, even the bid process alone is taking a lot longer than normal, just based on the availability of contractors to take on this type of work, and then obviously lead times that are associated with it. But in Rhode Island, for the early childhood care and education capital fund, the bond that we're going to be proposing, we're looking definitely at groups that are in a multitude of stages. And so we're looking at it from like a 3 to 5 year perspective, as far as groups that are able to take on a project.
Well, even here, in California, we have such a shortage of construction materials. So the wait makes everything longer right now.
Yeah, like especially windows for some reason, because the vinyl extrusions come from like one particular place in Louisiana, that has, like, windows have been our biggest hang up right now.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing a range, because sometimes people, they just need the technical assistance with getting the design in place, or, having a thorough site assessment as if it will actually work. And then the other part, which I think someone mentioned, was actually, does financially it work? Because I come into programs all the time where somebody says, well, this is what we want designed. And I go, you can't financially sustain that center if those are the kids you're going to serve. And so, it's that they haven't thought through the financial feasibility of it. So that's greatly important, I think, we need to make sure that gets on all these grant things, that they really understand the aging of children and how much they're getting reimbursed for, and et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and even just making sure that you have a market rate survey, right? That you know that there's actually a need in the area that you want to build childcare, because the last thing you want to do is invest and then all of a sudden their kids are actually being housed in other places. You know, it's critically important to think about, can you operate a building? Can you sustain a building over time? And do the numbers support, like the number of children that you're serving support that, as well as, you know, when there are things like increasing like wages that are a huge topic of conversation. Like, that is not in the formula right now for people who are looking to develop childcare spaces. They're not thinking about it from the pay equity scale and how to support that too.
Yeah, and here in California, there's, well, especially in the Bay Area, I'm very familiar with the Bay Area with our needs assessments. It's just that there's a huge need for infant toddler care. However, and again, I'm looking at more care that's going to be subsidized with state subsidies for the families. And you can't operate a children's center with infant toddler care unless you have a very robust preschool program. And then our little hookup right now is the state's transitioning to TK, which is pulling, you know, right now it's pulling mostly into the school districts, the talk of it is. And therefore, it really puts, I don't know how we're going to resolve that one, because they don't reimburse infant toddler care at the state level to cover costs. So that's why you have to have a lot of preschoolers. And if you have half the preschoolers pulled out, it's going to be a real financial interesting puzzle to solve.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we can obviously carry on this conversation. We know some of the issues that childcare providers are facing with operations and sustainability, let alone wanting to make sure that we're creating great environments for kiddos to be in. So definitely, this is not the end of this conversation. This is just the pause until the next one. You know, it's 3 o'clock right now. I know we were originally slated for 4, but I think we got through everything that we wanted to get through with enough time to let everybody go if they wanted to. Mike's contact information, as well as my contact information, are located in the chat. We're always happy to talk about all of these things whenever you want, and certainly include us when there are conversations that seem relevant around this topic. But I want to, again, very warmly say thank you for attending. I appreciate this conversation here at the end, especially. I think this is the kind of stuff that we need to be talking more about and more collectively with our agencies that provide funding for this purpose. But again, thanks so much. And I hope everybody has a great holiday.